The Nissan Qashqai. Now, this car certainly wasn't the first small family crossover, but it was the car that made that type of car so popular. And Nissan has sold millions of these since it first introduced the Qashqai in 2007, and it's been a firm favourite of families and, of course, caravan owners. This is the new third generation car, and what we want to find out is this car still an impressive piece of kit?
In the past, you could never really call the Qashqai as having daring design, but this new one is considerably more interesting to look at. It clearly takes key styling cues from its predecessors, at the rear in particular, but neatly updates it with more modern features, such as the curving daytime running and indicator lights, and there's even the option of massive 20-inch wheels for the first time.
Inside, and what a transformation from the outgoing Qashqai, whose interior was starting to look a little bit dated, but this one is really cutting edge. Now, this car is a top spec car, it's a Techno Plus, so that's why it's got these very posh quilted leather seats. We've got leather on the dash and we've got a head-up display. But most models are very well equipped, and it doesn't matter which one you go for, the build quality in here is exemplary. Everything feels really well put together. Now, I would avoid the entry level spec. I mean, it doesn't even get a screen, it just gets a little radio that sits on the top of the dash. It looks a little bit awkward. But even the model one up from the entry-level trim gets a screen, it gets Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It also gets alloy wheels and air conditioning and keyless start. Now, the infotainment system itself, it's not the best, to be perfectly honest with you. This is an area which Nissan have carried over from the previous Qashqai, and the screen itself is fine, it's just that the graphics are a little bit dated and it's just a little bit clunky and a bit laggy to use. There are some shortcut buttons here though, which is really good, and there's a row of ventilation controls, so it's easy to use on the move. You don't have to go into the touch screen to change the temperature, for example. And all the controls, they've got a lovely tactile feeling to them. The touch screen aside, this is a very nice place to be. The new Qashqai has a slightly longer wheelbase than the model it replaces, and that really benefits interior space, particularly so here in the back. Now, I'm just under 6 foot. That seat is set up in my driving position, and there is plenty of knee-room and plenty of headroom, even in this car with its panoramic glass roof. Now, there's ISOFIX points in both outer seats. There's an armrest with a couple of cup holders. We've got 2 types of USB charging ports down here on the center console. And one thing I really do like are the little clips here, which you can tuck the seatbelt away, so when you do fold down the rear seats, the seatbelt doesn't get caught. The only other thing I really do like about the Nissan Qashqai are the doors. Weird thing to like, I know, but look at this. Look how wide they open. They're actually the widest opening doors in the small SUV class, which really does make unloading and loading large items that little bit easier. Round at the boot, and the good news is this new Qashqai has a slightly larger boot than the model it replaces. It's a very practical space actually, and easily one of the largest boots on, well, in the class. Now, mid-level models and above get this luggage board system. It allows you to divide the boot up to stop items rolling around, which is very clever. There's also some decent underfloor storage, and there's a little storage for oddments either side of the boot. Over here, we've actually got the tow bar. Now, in the Qashqai, there's only a detachable tow bar and a fixed tow bar. There's no electrically deployable one, unfortunately. The only real negative with this boot are, well, there's no levers here to fold down the rear seats. You have to do that by opening the doors. But once you've done that, you've got a completely flat loading area. And the only other thing to mention is the electric tailgate, which comes as standard on Techna and Techna Plus models. Now, like rivals like the Kia Sportage and the Peugeot 3008, the Qashqai doesn't come in diesel power. There's just one petrol engine. It's a 1.3 and it's available in two different power outputs, 140 horsepower and 158. Both are mild hybrids. Now, the 140 only comes with two-wheel drive, so power is sent to the front wheels, and a manual gearbox, whereas the 158, well, that comes in a choice of manual and automatic gearboxes and 2- and 4-wheel drive. Now, available in 2022 is something called the Nissan Qashqai e-Power. Now, this is quite an interesting car actually, because under the bonnet you'll find a 1.5 litre petrol engine, but it doesn't power the wheels. What it does power is a generator, and in turn that powers an electric motor, and it's electricity which powers the front wheel. There's not much difference between the two 1.3 petrol engines, but the one I would recommend for towing is the 158. That little bit of extra punch really does help when you're hitched up to a caravan. And if you can afford it, go for the 4-wheel drive. Again, that extra bit of traction will help in slippery conditions. Not only is the interior a lot more premium feeling than before, but also the way the Qashqai drives. In this car, we've got 20-inch wheels, and you would expect it to fidget and bang into every single pothole on the road, and it doesn't. It's a very comfortable ride. Now, the Qashqai actually comes with two different kinds of rear suspension depending on the size of alloy wheels and trim that you go for. Now, if you go for cars with 19-inch wheels and below, you get a torsion bar rear suspension. But cars with 20-inch wheels, well, they get a multi-link rear suspension. And also the all-wheel drive cars get the multi-link as well, and it does do a slightly better job than the torsion bar at leveling out the ride. But even if you go for cars with 18-inch wheels and that torsion bar rear suspension, you will get a really compliant ride. Nissan will try and convince you this is a very sporting SUV, and what with its suspension and good body control, you might think that. However, the chief culprit that lets the side down is the steering. It is very light and overly assisted. But come on, this is a family SUV after all, and what with its comfortable suspension and comfortable driving position and very good refinement levels, I mean, it is eerily quiet in here. This is one very comfortable SUV to go on a touring holiday in.
When driving solo, the Qashqai's engine felt a little lethargic at low revs, which we expected to be exacerbated once towing, but this wasn't the case. Acceleration is smooth and the gearbox is well matched to the engine, performing particularly smoothly between 30 and 50 miles an hour, and when pulling away from a standstill, that extra slug of electric power can just be felt. Fuel consumption when hitched was an unremarkable 23 mpg versus 40 mpg when driving solo. Once up to cruising speeds, we were amazed at how stable and well planted the outfit was, even with some crosswinds, with hardly any lateral movement at all.
What do I think then to this new third generation Nissan Qashqai? Well, I think Nissan have really improved their Halo product, because the previous Qashqai felt just a little bit rough around the edges. This one is really impressively refined. The interior is a really nice and comfortable place to be. It's made pretty well as well, and the way this car goes down the road, well, it feels sophisticated and comfort, and it's very, very refined.